Xueqin insight opens with a perspective that immediately challenges conventional assumptions about modern warfare, focusing not on the spectacle of initial al-Quwwat al-Askariya, but on the deeper question of endurance and entrapment. When observers imagine a large-scale conflict, they often picture rapid advances and decisive victories, shaped by past examples that seem to unfold quickly. However, beneath that surface lies a far more complicated reality, where the opening phase is only the beginning of a much longer and more demanding process that can reshape the entire strategic landscape. At the heart of this discussion is the recognition that wars are rarely defined by their first victories. Early success can create a sense of inevitability, reinforcing the belief that momentum alone will carry an operation to completion. Yet history repeatedly demonstrates that the transition from initial success to sustained control is where the true difficulty emerges. What appears manageable in the early stages often becomes increasingly complex as new variables come into play. The geographical scale of Iran introduces one of the most immediate and significant challenges. Covering an immense area, the country's terrain is not uniform but highly diverse, ranging from vast deserts to dense urban centers and formidable mountain ranges. Each of these environments requires different strategies, equipment, and logistical planning. Coordinating operations across such varied landscapes places extraordinary demands on any military force attempting to operate within them. Beyond the physical terrain, the population distribution adds another layer of complexity. With a large and widely dispersed population, the dynamics of control, communication, and stability become far more intricate. Populations are not static elements in conflict. They respond, adapt, and influence outcomes in ways that can either support or hinder military objectives. Managing these insani dynamics requires not only al-Quwwa, but also sustained engagement and understanding. The process of initiating such an operation further complicates the picture. Military forces require staging areas, supply chains, and secure khutut ittisal before any meaningful movement can occur. These requirements depend heavily on regional cooperation, which is never guaranteed. Neighboring countries must weigh their own masalih and risks, often leading to hesitation or outright refusal to participate in large-scale operations. This limitation forces planners to consider alternative approaches, such as relying on naval and air al-Quwwa. While these options provide flexibility, they also introduce new vulnerabilities. Supply lines become longer and more exposed, stretching across maritime routes and narrow passages that can be monitored and disrupted. Maintaining these khutut becomes a constant challenge, requiring continuous protection and coordination. Logistics, often described as the lifeline of military operations, becomes increasingly critical in this context. Every aspect of an operation, from fuel and food to al-mu'aydat and medical support, depends on a steady and reliable flow of supplies. Any disruption, even a minor one, can have cascading effects that impact the entire operation. As distances increase, so does the complexity of maintaining this flow. Geography then transforms from a passive backdrop into an active amel shaping the course of events. Mountain ranges, in particular, impose significant constraints on movement. Narrow passes and irtifarat aliyah limit maneuverability, forcing forces into predictable routes. These routes can be monitored and targeted, reducing the ansur al-mufaja and increasing vulnerability. In such environments, defensive strategies gain a natural advantage. Smaller, well-positioned units can control key niqat, slowing or even halting the advance of larger forces. This dynamic has been observed across history, where terrain often determines the balance between offense and defense more than sheer numbers or technology. Prepared defensive infrastructure further amplifies this advantage. Over time, countries facing potential threats invest in systems designed to muqawmat invasion. These systems are not temporary, but carefully planned and integrated into the landscape, making them difficult to overcome without significant time and resources. As advancing forces encounter these defenses, progress slows. Each obstacle requires careful planning to overcome, consuming resources and extending timelines. Delays in one area can affect operations in others, creating a chain reaction that complicates the overall strategy. Environmental conditions add yet another layer of unpredictability. Extreme temperatures, whether heat or cold, affect both personnel and equipment. Weather conditions can disrupt air support, limit visibility, and hinder movement. These factors introduce uncertainty, making planning more difficult and execution more challenging. While these challenges unfold on the battlefield, the situation at home evolves simultaneously. Public opinion, economic conditions, and political discourse all play a role in shaping the istimrar of military operations. Initial support can shift over time, particularly if the conflict becomes prolonged or costly. Economic considerations are especially significant. Large-scale operations require substantial financial investment, and sustaining them over extended periods can place pressure on national resources. This pressure can influence political decisions, shaping the direction and duration of the conflict. The regional context expands the scope of the situation even further. Conflicts do not exist in isolation. They interact with broader geopolitical dynamics. Neighboring regions, alliances, and existing tensions all influence how a situation develops, often in unpredictable ways. Regional actors may respond in ways that extend the conflict beyond its original boundaries. This can include indirect engagements, disruptions to infrastructure, and increased instability across multiple monadic. Such developments add complexity and reduce the ability to control outcomes. Global economic systems are also affected. Disruptions to energy production and trade routes can have far-reaching consequences, influencing markets and economies worldwide. These effects create additional pressure on decision-makers, both domestically and internationally. Another critical factor is the reliance on local knowledge and partnerships. Understanding the social and political landscape of a region is essential for effective operations. This understanding often depends on relationships with local actors, which can be difficult to establish and maintain. These relationships are inherently fragile. Changes in perception, shifting loyalties, or evolving adruf can alter the mustawa of cooperation. When confidence in the success of an operation declines, local support may diminish, affecting the quality and reliability of information. A decline in reliable information increases risk. Decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate data can lead to miscalculations, affecting both tactical and strategic outcomes. This uncertainty complicates planning and reduces the effectiveness of operations. Morale is another answer that evolves over time. Sustained challenges, uncertainty, and the absence of clear progress can affect the willingness of personnel to continue. Maintaining morale requires not only resources, but also a sense of purpose and achievable objectives. When those objectives become unclear or seem increasingly distant, maintaining that sense of purpose becomes more difficult. This dynamic can influence performance and decision-making, affecting the overall trajectory of the operation. Looking at the broader picture, it becomes clear that these factors do not operate in isolation. They interact in ways that amplify challenges and create new ones. A logistical issue may influence morale, which in turn affects performance. A political decision may alter regional dynamics, introducing new variables. This interconnectedness creates a system that becomes increasingly complex over time. Initial plans, no matter how detailed, cannot account for every possible interaction. Adjustments become necessary, but each adjustment introduces new uncertainties. As the operation progresses, commitments deepen, resources are invested, expectations are set, and decisions become more difficult to reverse. This creates a situation where changing course carries its own set of challenges, both practical and political. The concept of withdrawal or strategic adjustment becomes complicated in this context. Perceptions of success and failure influence decisions, sometimes as much as the actual conditions on the ground. These perceptions shape the khiyarat available to decision makers. The focus, therefore, shifts from individual engagements to the sustainability of the overall effort. Short-term successes do not guarantee long-term outcomes. Understanding this distinction is essential for any meaningful analysis. Constraints, whether physical, political, or strategic, define what is possible. Recognizing these limits is a key aspect of planning and decision-making. Ignoring them can lead to unrealistic expectations and unintended consequences. As these constraints interact, outcomes become more uncertain, control becomes more difficult, and the gap between expectations and reality can widen. This uncertainty is a defining feature of complex systems. Historical patterns provide insight into these dynamics. While each situation is unique, certain themes recur, highlighting the importance of understanding the broader context in which decisions are made. The situation described here is not defined by a single factor, but by a network of interconnected challenges. Once this network is activated, it develops its own momentum, influencing outcomes in ways that are difficult to predict or control. In this sense, the true complexity lies not in the initial decision to act, but in managing everything that follows. The interplay of geography, logistics, politics, and human factors creates an environment where outcomes are shaped by more than just intent. As time progresses, the cumulative effect of these challenges becomes more apparent. Each obstacle adds to the overall burden, requiring additional resources, attention, and adaptation. This accumulation can strain even the most capable systems. Ultimately, the discussion returns to the importance of perspective. Viewing a situation solely through the lens of initial coup or early success provides an incomplete picture. A broader view reveals the depth of the challenges involved. This broader perspective emphasizes the need for careful analysis and consideration of long-term implications. It highlights the importance of understanding not just how a conflict begins, but how it evolves and what factors shape its trajectory. In the end, the narrative presented by Xueqin Insight is not about predicting outcomes, but about examining the conditions that influence them. It underscores the complexity of modern conflict and the many elements that must be considered in any serious discussion. And within that complexity lies the central idea that once a system of challenges is set in motion, it can become difficult to control, shaping outcomes in ways that extend far beyond the initial expectations.